Hi, I'm David Katay of Urban Astro, and today I'm going to go over some of the equipment that I am currently using in my astrophotography journey. Everybody, it seems, has a kit that for them is their go-to kit, their kit that they like to use when they go out to do astrophotography. And a number of astrophotographers will actually have several different kits that they use, several different kinds of equipment, if you will, or equipment setups that they may actually use. I currently have my one equipment setup, and I'm in the process of setting up another scope, a 6-inch Ritchie Creighton, which I will share in another video. But for right now, what I am using is an 80 millimeter refractor with ED glass. It doesn't bill itself as an apochromatic, but it essentially functions as one, and it does a pretty decent job. And so what I wanted to do today was kind of go over some of the equipment that I have so that you can see what my rig looks like and all the pieces and parts that go into making the images that I'm able to make. So to start off, I'm going to start off with the scope itself. Now, believe it or not, my wife had actually bought this for me last year for Christmas, and this is the SV Boney 80 millimeter ED refractor. And it's an f7. I don't know if you can see that, but it's an f7, and it has ED glass. It basically has FPL 51 glass with a lanthanum, whatever that is, a lanthanum crown. So supposedly it produces images that I'm fairly happy with. There's minimal chromatic aberration, nothing to really shake a stick at, and I find that it works fairly well, even though it is kind of inexpensive scope. I've gone online and I've actually found that there's about 2 other scopes that essentially look identical to this scope and have the same essential features that this scope has, and I believe that they're probably all built by the same Chinese factory, and they're just sold underneath different names. This one happens to be SV Boney. No one's really ever sure how to pronunciate that, but anyways, that's the kind of scope. It has a focuser, of course, and it's a 10-to-1. I still got my focuser cap on, but there you see, there's my 10-to-1. And so if I was to use this thing in manual focusing, I would probably use that, but I don't use it in manual focusing. So that's the scope, and like I say, I haven't had very many issues with it. There's slight blooming and like the oxygen 3 filter that I think are probably more related to the filter than they are to the scope itself. And like I said, I haven't had any real significant issues with it, and it's a very common scope. It's a scope that you can find from other manufacturers, other companies that I'm not going to name, but you can do your research and kind of figure that one out. So anyways, that's the scope. The power or the brains behind all this is this little PC right here, and this is the PC that I use to run all my software. This is a Windows 10 professional software PC, and it has an additional MMC card in here, which gives me another like 500 gigs of memory, storage memory that I use to put all of my subs on. And this is from Melee. It's a Melee Quieter 2, I believe is what the model is. You can find it on Amazon. And in fact, I've picked up another one that I'm going to be putting together for my RC 6-inch scope, and I'll be going over how to set it up in other videos that will be coming out. On top of this guy, and this is just velcroed onto a little platform here. I don't know if you can see this little platform here, but I've got this little platform here. I got my guide scope on one side, and then my PC and my power box. This is the Pegasus Astro Power Box Advance, and it's the new one that came out, I don't know, about 6 months ago. Has a USB hub, so it's got a bunch of USB ports here, as well as power ports that go to power a lot of my devices, as well as a extension here, which you can see right here. It's for temperature and humidity, so that way it can record it. I find that this is really kind of superfluous because this was really designed to be used with a Pegasus Astro focuser, which I do not use. I use the ZWO EAF and not the Pegasus Astro focuser, and so it doesn't really do much, but I can see what the particular temperature is. And then underneath this, you probably can't see it very well, but right here, this is just a USB hub that I have connected for some extra peripherals. And what I usually do is I also have a QHY Polemaster. My mind went blank there. I have a QHY Polemaster, which I will plug into this when I want to do polar alignment, as well as a Pegasus Astro Systems Flatmaster 150 that I'll plug into this thing. So this thing is used for basically ancillary USB stuff that I don't have enough ports on the little Melee PC here to be able to use, or it's difficult to get up attached to the USB ports here on the back of the Pegasus Astro Power Box. Next in line, just sticking with the OTA here, next in line would actually be, let me turn this thing around, would be my EAF from ZWO. This is my electronic automatic focuser, EAF, and I have this hooked up to my focuser here, as you can probably tell right here. And I use this in order to do my focusing. I've got it to work fairly well. It took me a little while to get this bugger working, to whereas I could get repeatable focusing, but I eventually managed to do that. And like I said, it took a little while and a little bit of fiddling, and your mileage may vary, but I've got it set up now so that it works great. I've got the proper settings and it works like a charm, and I think it may fail an autofocus routine maybe once out of every 100 times. And usually I've got it set up so that it will go back and reinitiate an autofocus sequence, and it usually works after that. So like I say, it's gotten to the point where it's fairly dependable, and I don't really have any major issues with it, thank God. The next thing down is a field flattener, and the funny thing is, this is just the regular Orion field flattener for an f7 refractor, and it does a pretty good job. I haven't had any issues with it. I actually have a field reducer, which is the 0.8 field reducer, and I noticed that I was having issues with the stars along the edge. So SV Boney actually comes out or they came out along with Astro, which tells me that this is probably the same scope as the 80 millimeter AT scope that you can find with the ED glass. But anyways, they have a 0.8 field reducer and flattener that I've picked up. So when I want to reduce this thing from a 640 millimeter down to, 640. This thing is a 560 millimeter focal length scope. With the field reducer, the 0.8, it brings it down to 448 millimeter. So it normally shoots at 560, but with a reducer, and I haven't yet tried this Avoni one. I just got it. I just received it just before Christmas, and so I haven't had really time to throw it on and see how well it works, but that will be coming up shortly. As soon as I get clear skies, which I haven't seen. Next to that is my Falcon rotator from Pegasus Astro Systems, and I have recently picked this thing up because, again, my goal is to automate this process as much as I possibly can, and part of that processing, part of the automation is to be able to, when I'm in Nina, to set up what my framing, the framing that I would like it to take pictures at, and then the rotator here will just make the adjustments to get everything lined up so that I'm at the right angle for the photographs that I want to take. So I'm still working with this and still playing with this. There's still some configurations that I need to figure out. And next down the line is my EAF, my electronic filter wheel. It's a 7-position 2-inch filter wheel, and I've got my LRGB filters in here as well as my HA03 and S2 filters in here as well. And this thing has been a dream. It's been beautiful. It just goes to the filter that it needs to go to. Don't have any issues with it. I've got all my filters registered in Nina and the ASCOM software, and it all just works. And so it's been a real pleasure. And then the business end here, as you can see here, is my ASI 2600 mm Pro. This is a camera that I picked up this past spring. I also have the ASI 533 MC Pro, which I'm probably going to end up selling because I've been doing exclusively monochrome, and I kept the color camera because I wasn't sure if I would acclimate to using LRGB, but it's worked really well, and so I don't see any reason to keep the 533, so I'll probably end up selling that camera. I may get the 294, the ASI 294. It's only 11.7 megapixels, but it has larger pixels. The pixels I think are like 4.8 or 4.7 nanometer versus the 3.76 on this guy. And so for the new RC, for the new 6-inch Ritchie Creighton that I've got, the new 6-inch RC, that pixel size is better paired with the focal lengths of that camera, of that telescope, than is this camera. But I'll play with this camera on it and see whether or not it's really worth going to a 294. I'm hoping that I can stay with this. Supposedly this is going to result in some undersampling, but again, hopefully it's not going to be that significant and it won't be that noticeable. So we shall see. So the last two pieces, of course, is my SV Bony 60 millimeter guide scope, which I picked up for relatively cheap. It's worked so good. It's worked good so far. It has a helical focuser here, which is great if I adjust anything on the camera and I need to come back and I need to adjust my focusing. It's pretty straightforward. It's a helical focuser. And what I decided to do, instead of buying the ASI version of this guy, I went ahead and I have this Neptune M version, which is actually a IMX 178 camera. So basically this is very, very similar to the ASI 178 camera, which is used basically for planetary, but it works great as a guide camera. It's 6.4 megabytes, and it's 14-bit. It's a mono camera, and I use this as my guide camera for guiding. And I haven't had any issues with it. It seems to work just fine. So that's kind of my setup. This is my go-to kit right now. And of course, all this sits on top of a Skywatcher EQ6R Pro, which I picked up used at a fairly decent rate, or a fairly decent cost, sorry. And it works really, really well for me. I love the mount. It's pretty responsive, and I don't have any issues with it. So one thing I did get was an ADM dovetail plate here. This is the Los Mandi plate. I just like that versus the Vixen plate that this thing came with. I also got some risers here. I got some risers here and to go there, so that it would not interfere with the EAF. So that's some of the pieces and parts that I've gotten basically to expand this thing. But this plate is pretty good. It's pretty decent. It works great. It sits very, very comfortably on my Skywatcher EQ6R Pro. Don't have any issues with it. I've been very, very happy with it. So if you have any questions or anything, leave them down below in the comments. And if you like this kind of material, feel free to go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below and hit the little notification bell, and you'll be notified when there are updated videos. So until next time, thank you for watching, and good luck imaging and clear skies.